Hey everyone, today's species spotlight is on a species of snake that probably has the worst reputation for being nasty and bitey and doesn't want to be held and unpredictable and yada yada yada. And so today, after today's video, I'm going to leave it up to you all to decide whether or not that is in fact a truly deserved reputation. So of course today we're talking about the yellow anaconda. Now, first things first, big shout out to Braden Exotics. The animal that you see in almost all the footage in today's video does come from them, as well as they have been featured in a great many of the species spotlight videos. If you would like to, and at the end of this video, there's a link to the playlist for all the species spotlights, so you can see many more of their really cool, amazing, and oddball species of snakes. So, the yellow anaconda. The yellow anaconda is actually the smallest species of the 4 different kinds of anacondas found in the world. However, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily a small animal. Now, anacondas, from the small yellows to the giant greens, the largest species of boa and snake in the world, largest, not longest, are all endemic to South America. They all are species of boids or boidae, which are essentially non-venomous, usually larger, but not always, constrictor snakes that are almost always live-bearing or vivarious, which means they give live birth just like people and mammals and yada 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 yada. Now, the yellow anaconda is again endemic to South America. They range in across most of the Paraguay River tributaries, flood regions, or more commonly referred to as the Pantanal region. If any of you watch a lot of the nature documentaries like, Planet Earth and those really cool videos, if you don't, you should probably go watch those too. The Pantanal is a very well-known region for biodiversity in a good part of central South America. In addition, they can also be found in other countries like parts of Brazil and Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia. These guys are what are generally considered a semi-aquatic species of snake. While that's a little bit controversial depending on who you want to pick a fight with on the internet, it is true that they do spend a good chunk of their lives, from popping out of their moms to the day they go, is usually spent in and around the water, hence semi-aquatic, and they do have a number of really cool adaptations that would allude to them being considered semi-aquatic. For instance, when you very first look at the yellow anaconda or any of them, they have their eyes a little bit further up on their heads, just like a lot of semi-aquatic to aquatic animals. What that is meant to do is to allow them to have just that little bit of their body exposed, specifically their eyes and nostrils, and then everything else can set below the surface of the water. And then when you actually look at the size of this animal, as previously mentioned, they're not small. While being the smallest of the 4 anacondas, they are very large. Like most of the boids, the females are significantly longer than the males, and the females very often achieve lengths of 10 to 11 feet and exceed them with regularity over 13 feet. Males, again, typically being a little smaller, but still frequently exceed lengths of 7 to 8 feet long. So, pretty big animal. They're pretty heavy bodied too, not as ginormous as the green ones, but they do have quite a bit of girth. And a lot of that is used to kind of be able to balance out in the water where they spend a good amount of their time. So that means that this aquatic lifestyle, even this very large animal, can stay relatively hidden and almost disappear entirely in the depths. And then you look at their coloration. We're used to, and although I will say that anyone who watches movies are used to the giant greens who hunt Ice Cube and J-Lo and Owen Wilson, they're used to that kind of very distinct green on the top, yellow on the bottom. The yellow anacondas obviously get their name for their very interesting and very unique coloration. That kind of varying shades of yellow, yellowish green to brownish yellow is their entire body color, and then they have those really nice dark chocolatey brown to solid black stripes across their face, and then all those varying sizes spots that are along their bodies. And while you would think that this bumblebee coloration would make them stick out like a sore thumb, it again has to do with camouflage and them living in and around the water. That pattern specifically is meant to be able to break up the shape and essentially the size of the animal, the snake specifically. So when you look down into the water, when you think about the Paraguay River, the Rio Negro, the Brazilian rainforest, all of those things, when you think about water in those areas, it's not exactly crystal clear water, right? And I talked a little bit about this more in the green anaconda video. It's a little bit kind of murky. It's very iron rich in a good chunk of a lot of these animals' ranges. And so this kind of off-colored animal with the varying spots meant to break up the light and the size of the animal meant to entirely, they can disappear, as I ramble on, I apologize, they will essentially disappear into the water. really, really cool. Now, the thing about these anacondas that's really cool about them being essentially ambush predators in and amongst the water, it's that they are fairly generalistic when it comes to their predation. Obviously, constrictors, they're ambush hunters, and they grab their prey and they constrict it, and that's how they actually go about getting their prey. But as young ones, typically they're eating a lot of birds, wading birds that are going in and around the water, usually in the shallow parts of the water, as well as they will often feed on reptiles, even small caiman, and amphibians and things like that, as well as small mammals. And as they get larger, obviously their prey can grow in size, as well as the kind of diversity of said prey, to the point where very large animals are taking in larger caiman and even things like small capybara, the largest rodent in the world. So pretty cool generalistic animals. Although, just like with everything else in the Amazon, it's really had to have a true apex predator, with everything essentially being food for something else in that entire ecosystem. From piranhas that eat everything, that are preyed upon by giant river otters, that are preyed upon by caiman, that are preyed upon by jaguars, that are preyed upon by anacondas, that are preyed upon jaguars, and the caiman. Yeah, it's a whole thing, right? That's why the Amazon is so crazy cool. Now, all of this in mind about this yellow anaconda that spends all of its time in and around the water doesn't necessarily mean that it is only purely going to be in the water. They are often found times in floodplains and in swamps and in marshes outside of the water, even sometimes up in trees, basking and getting in and around. Because while mainly being ambush predators, they will also seek out prey animals. So, for instance, we have very frequently found, especially in the parts of the Mcdougall region, yellow anacondas and other large constrictor snakes going up into trees, going into holes and raiding nests of birds and more arboreal species. So they can and do climb. Now, we have all this information about kind of how they are in the wild. Let's get to the meat of probably why a good chunk of you are watching these videos. Let's talk about them in captivity. Now, obviously, I have the green anaconda, Sir Mix-a-Lot, and the captive care for them is very similar to that of the yellow anaconda. The yellow anaconda being much, much more prevalent in the hobby because they were not while they have been CITES or banned in different areas and different things like that, they have never been part of the Lasiac ban with the green anacondas and reticulated pythons and Burmese pythons. So they have been much more prevalent, as well as they've been allowed to be exported in larger numbers than the green anacondas. So let's talk about them in captivity again. Yeah. That being said, now, these guys obviously, as adults, need enormous habitats to be able to house them properly. As mentioned about how they are in the wild, they need large areas of water for them to get into, as well as enclosures that can hold high levels of humidity and moderate temperatures with a decent basking spot, being from near the equator. So, unlike with a ball python or a boa constrictor that we're probably more used to, the yellow anacondas will spend a great deal of their time sitting in their water. Not because they need to shed or we're not keeping humidity properly. That's just where they like to spend a lot of their time. And when a snake spends a lot of time in their water, what do you think it does in the water? So that's something they're going to have to be well aware of and prepared for, is frequent, often water changes on very large areas of water. We're talking tens of gallons of water for adult animals. We're talking again about animals that exceed lengths of 7, 8, 10 plus feet long. So huge amounts of water, as well as plenty of land area for them to come out on, bask on, dry out if they so choose. Full spectrum lighting is always a really good thing that we like to advocate for, as well as even hides up on the land as well, and even things that could be submerged if you have large enough enclosures of water. They could actually come out and even be slightly exposed up, like a very large, like half sunken log or tree branch or something like that. Now, the yellow anaconda, remember at the very beginning where we talked about how I said that they're very nasty, unpredictable animals, or at least that seems to be the kind of general consensus about these animals. Well, anacondas, like pretty much all baby snakes and snakes in general, are very reactive animals. They're not as puppy, cuddly, feely. They're very calculative. They're very if-then animals in general. And so when we giant Godzilla monsters, and even this goes towards the older, larger, mature animals, are going in to grab these animals who don't want to be touched, they're going to react with the only thing that they have in their arsenal, which is their face filled with pointy things. And in the case of the anacondas, they have a very unique attribute. Most snakes, they at least usually will assume some sort of defensive body language and posture. That S, and then when they strike out, either to grab a prey item or to defensively say, leave me alone, it is typically up, up, or out in whatever direction they are pointing at. In the case of obviously like a cobra or something that are raised up, they're going to go down or again kind of straight forward. Anacondas have this ability to essentially strike out from really any angle. I have seen animals go straight back on themselves and out to different areas. More than once, people have said, or I have at least read, although this is a little bit of the Wikipedia copy and paste type jargon that you see a lot, is that if you look at the muscles right at the top of their neck, right behind their head, you will see right before they will actually strike out in that direction on which side of their head their muscle tenses. However, most people aren't faster than snakes. So this kind of gives it that reputation for being striky as a little baby animal that doesn't like to be messed with, at least at first, for a good chunk of their time, as well as they can kind of go out at any direction, which makes learning their body language much more difficult even for the more seasoned hands. Coupled with all of this, that a good majority of the yellow anacondas, at least for a long time, and still are wild-caught animals, or captive-born or farm-hatched, but farm-raised animals that come from the wild and then come into captivity. So we have wild-caught animals that don't like to be messed with, that can strike out, so it's really bad reputation. However, if you do decide you want to bring in one of these animals, there are some ways to do that. Number one, most people like to get a neonate, or a very young, newly born, or a younger animal. Number one, it's more manageable size, and then number two, you can learn to work with an animal at a younger age to learn their body language and the very specific ways and tells and communication you have with that specific animal as it grows larger. The other thing about these guys is that, while I said in the wild they are generalists, a lot of the times, again, as babies, they're eating a lot of those shore birds and small reptiles and amphibians. And so having a baby or a young animal, specifically one that was wild caught, may have a hard time switching over from birds to rodents. However, once you do get them fully established on rodents, they are amazing immaculate eaters. They're essentially trash cans. I can attest that my green anaconda, because, well, I don't keep yellows, I went full hog and got the green boy, had a very hard time switching him to rodents. Years only on frozen birds, until finally he's now eating rodents, and he's just taking them like that, which is super awesome. So, if you decide you want to have this anaconda, it is not one that is recommended for most people. Going with the size of the enclosures, the amount that goes into building them up, the maintenance that goes into that, as well as working with an animal that you really have to learn and develop a real relationship with to learn to be able to handle them comfortably, both for your sake and for their sake. And I can tell you, as a person who, even now, doesn't fully get a full read on anaconda's body and body communication, it is very rewarding to work with a snake that you have to build such a close relationship and trust building with. It's incredibly rewarding. Sir Mix-a-Lot, my green anaconda, does in fact have really good communication. I just had to learn to recognize it, that when he is done being handled, I have a very short amount of time to say, okay, you can go back. But usually, he is really good about letting me know when he's done. However, before I learned to recognize that body language and those tells that he was giving me, I didn't know which way he was going to be striking out. And while he rarely does, he will do it at any kind of crazy odd angle. And that applies to yellow anaconda as well. They can be very docile, placid animals once they are learned that respect and that trust and that relationship built up, and they can be really great. I've seen people actively use yellow anacondas in their standard rotation as ambassador animals. Sir Mix-a-Lot has come with me to very large expos in front of lots of little kids. It's all about that trust and relationship building. So if this is an animal that you decide you want, in fact, to be able to take home with you, then I 100% recommend that you find one that is been captive born and bred, almost like always, and one that is established well on rodents. As well as always reaching out to people who not only make these kind of YouTube videos like this, but working with a more advanced species. And while I'm sure there will be some people to say, oh, it's intermediate, this is just my opinion as a guy who just likes snakes and keeps several different species, that you would want to talk to people who have been keeping them for a long period of time always doing lots of research. I'm not going to be part of that do your own research crowd, but it's always best to get information from lots of different, hopefully trusted sources before making your own opinion and pulling the trigger on an animal that is, again, a very large, very powerful animal that needs to have that respectful trust relationship built up. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Hopefully it was a little bit enlightening about these guys. Again, big shout out to Braden Exotics for letting me hang out with their yellow anaconda, who, if I recall correctly, because it's been a little while since we did the recording of this footage, that she was, I think it's a she, was perfect the entire time. Really good, very calm, easygoing, until after I left and it came time to be going back into the enclosure, in which case, not as much, again, if I remember it correctly. So, again, hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you want to check out the full playlist of species spotlights, you can check it out right here again. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, want to see other stuff, let me know down in the comments. You can email me, check me out on all the other stuff. Thank you so much. Again, thank you all so much. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll check you next time.